As most of you know, we've tried to include in this conference and in conferences that follow a series of what we were originally calling hot topics. We're not sure exactly what hot topics would really translate into, so we had to work with that a little bit. But we wanted to make sure that we had a few sessions in our conference that talk about where our field is going, that talk about the future, that talk about some of the directions and ways that we might creatively develop what we do so well day in and day out to larger and newer opportunities. I think I mentioned to some of you earlier on that I've had a goal to try to develop ASTC's relationships, its alliances and partnerships, along two very important paths. One is certainly an educational path, and I talked a little bit about the fact that we're developing alliances and have formed a partnership with the National Science Teachers Association. And I think it's important because of the amount of work that our science centers do. 80% of our science centers actually have teacher training programs. And so that, I think, is a very important arm of what we do. But the other side of this that I think is equally, and in some ways even more important, is that we form strong partnerships and alliances with science-based organizations that truly are bringing our researchers together to have them address the critical societal issues and make sure that we're working closely to ensure that that science that is being generated, that current science, is being translated back into a form that our communities understand and are ready to apply. I have been very, very fortunate in starting in my position at ASTC that I had a good friend and colleague who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of AAAS, Alan Leshner, who has agreed to join us today to talk a little bit about where we are headed in terms of public engagement in science and where our science research community is working in terms of reaching out more effectively to the public. And let me just give you the hint and the signal that what that represents in what he has to say and what we're talking about here is the basis upon which we hope to form a very, very strong association partnership. So we hope that soon you all will be able to look to us and say, we need to reach deeper into the research community, or we need to reach more effectively to find out what's going on more currently in the science arena and put it to work for us. And this is a partnership that will help you do that. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome Alan Leshner to our stage here today to talk about the very first hot topic that we've had here for our conference. Alan, thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like you all to take note that I am a hot topic. You don't mind mentioning that to my wife. I'll explain why I schlepped to Hawaii on a weekend and got nearly divorced. Anyway, aloha. Aloha. That was about a B-. One more. Aloha. Aloha. Thank you very much. If you fly for 15 hours, you want somebody to at least give you an aloha. I had an interesting experience. Two experiences this morning, actually, as I was sitting in a session, which, by the way, I really have been enjoying the sessions that I've been to today. One was I had a panic attack that maybe the talk I was about to give was too similar to a talk I gave in 2005, and or a talk that I gave in 2002 or something. And so I frantically went into my computer and looked at it, and parts of it are not dissimilar, but there will be a test for those of you who've been in this organization a long time, which parts are different and which parts are the same. Part of that is that the climate has changed appreciably for issues like public engagement with science, and different things are happening and different possibilities are out there. The second thing, which is by way of apology if I talk even faster than I normally do and use even more too many slides than I normally do, is because I have changed this damn talk twice today on the basis of things. I'll point it out where those changes occur. Okay, you ready? So the name of this talk is Scientists and Science Centers, a Great Glocal Partnership Opportunity. Let me start with the caveat that you've all been quietly hopeful for. I am not, in fact, going to tell you how to do your business. I'm a firm believer in that ancient principle, never discuss floods with Noah. And do you like that? I did that myself. It is an adage I highly recommend because all you can do is embarrass yourself. Another part of it is that this partnership business, I confess, I am approaching from the point of view of a scientist who in fact has spent the last 30 years working in public policy and around issues like public engagement. But at my core, I'm a scientist, and that's my perspective. Having said that, I should tell you that I do in fact think you're part of the broader scientific community, even if some members within the scientific community don't have the same view of science that I hold. I see it as being made up of a very wide array of people, and I added this last night, were some other things that people do, and I would ask you, whether you have a scientific background or not, given what you do for a living, think of yourself as a part of this broader community, because it is in fact the broader community that has to face some of the issues that are going on. I do think there are many challenges and opportunities that are facing everybody with an interest in science, and that we need to be facing them together far better than we have in the past. And I'm going to start with some contextual comments. Some of you have heard me rail about some of these before. I apologize, you may nap during that part, then I'll wake you up. This is a truism, I call it the great truism, that science and technology are ever more embedded in every aspect of modern life, either as a cause or a cure. I'm not going to read you the list. This is almost every issue of modern life, and you can't find one that doesn't have a scientific component to it. That fact means that in order for all people to prosper in modern society, they need to have a fundamental understanding and comfort with science and technology. Now, I'll come back to the question of what does that actually mean, because there's obviously, or expectedly, a big disagreement between scientists who think they have to understand what pituitary adrenocortical function means. That's my own specialty, by the way, and it is the most important. It is, after all, the seat of the soul. That isn't quite what they mean, but that principle is true. The second corollary is obviously, in order for nations to prosper, they need to have scientific capacity. I've been collecting countries, by the way, countries where I've been in the presence of either a science minister or the head of state, that's been small countries, and where somebody, some leader says, science is good for innovation, innovation is good for the economy, we're going to take over the world, we're going to invest in science. I'm up to about 28 countries. And what's interesting about it is countries from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west. Countries like Rwanda, my favorite example. Rwanda, one of the poorest countries in the world, has no natural resources. The president, Paul Kagame, decided he would invest in brains. I am a neuroscientist, so I love that. But nonetheless, he has decided to build his country by investing in science and science education, and has been delivering on it. The third point, of course, is obvious. For science to prosper, the whole relationship between science and the rest of the society has to be a good one, and therefore we need people to be comfortable and familiar in science. So, I just said that. Why did I play it? All right. See, I blew the intro to that. All right. You didn't see that happen. Given those other correlations, the requirement is that the relationship be a good one. Bing, I did that too. And it has not always been smooth. You like it? That is really hard. You know, I make all my own talks, and so this is a lot of work. So you gotta enjoy these things more. There aren't a lot of them. So anyway, but you understand that as well as I do, and over the course of the last 2 decades, in fact, we've been having a tough time. And as Charles Dickens would say, we've been living in the best of times and the worst of times. And I have to tell this story, some of you may have heard it, because Bud is here and he's a former government guy. So when I was in the government, you know, I was the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, gave away $1 billion a year. Nobody ever corrected you because they want to be nice to you. So I used to say, as Shakespeare would say, we've been living in the bone bowl. And then I came to AAAS, the first speech I gave, I used that line. Somebody said, idiot. What? And I realized I don't have any money to give away anymore. But, so, on the one hand, we are living in the best of scientific times, and in fact, advances in science are continuing to come at a tremendous rate, both incrementally, the normal progress of science, and those big jumps that occur every once in a while, most of which are coming as a result of the advent of new technologies. On the other hand, the worst of times part is that there is tremendous tension. The tension has been greater over the last decade than in my entire scientific lifetime. It's not totally new. I remember Galileo, as do you, but a little bit more recently, we've had a tough time. And this is my favorite quote in the world from Abraham Lincoln: public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And really, that's what I want to talk about. Now, I think it's important for everyone to recognize, particularly the scientific community, that a lot of the tension that's going on between science and the rest of society is literally our fault. It may not be our fault as an issue of scale. So, for example, there are very few instances of scientific misconduct, but every time somebody does something fraudulent, it undermines the entire scientific enterprise. Conflict of interest. The National Institutes of Health, one of the most beloved organizations, had 5 instances of conflict of interest among 5,000 scientists. Boom, their budget was in jeopardy. They were on the front page of every newspaper. You know, how awful are those people at NIH? It's a tremendous problem. Hyperbolic or exaggerated claims, the recent discussions about glaciers coming out of the IPCC report based on over 10,000 studies about global warming. But what about that exaggeration? You got it. Those issues undermine the relationship between science and society tremendously. But there are external factors as well, and they are the ones that I think we collectively can work on together, and I hope we will. The truth is, and I will tell you that scientists say this to me all the time, it looks bad because of where you sit, but where I sit, people love us. And the truth is, yes, people do generally still respect science and technology. Now, this is a study published in Science Indicators. You know, this is a different version of one that all of you have seen. But I wanted to show you that when the prestige of various professions were tested in the American public, scientists were number 2, second only to firefighters. I want to point out where lawyers are. Way down there. So people do tremendously respect us, and they like science. This is another Science Indicators chart. And what it shows is, 70 to 80% of the public believes that the benefits of science outweigh the risk. That's great. The problem is they have no idea what it is. By the way, it is not true about extrasensory perception. I'm a psychologist. Astrology, probably not scientific, and I'll let you decide about evolution. And the issue, though, is not just that people don't get it, that they don't understand it.